ancient China that you guys have been reviewing on your sheets. Some of the more important ones, some of the ones that you guys need to know for the upcoming test that will take place later this week or into early next week. So let's go ahead and talk through some of these things. And the first of these dynasties that we're going to kind of talk about is the Shang Dynasty, which it looks like this is going to give me trouble, so we'll just go do this. Is the Shang Dynasty, and the Shang Dynasty was the first real dynasty of ancient China, and you can see that they were very powerful around 1500 to 1100 BC. And the big thing here is that they did not control all of ancient China. They just only controlled a portion of it. The dynasties wouldn't come into power for all the control of it until at a later date. So the Shang was one of those dynasties that was the very first dynasty, and it was very important for that particular reason because it kind of established the dynasty phase of ancient China. The next dynasty, in terms of the road we're talking about here, is the Zhou Dynasty. And the Zhou Dynasty, it was pretty much important because it was the longest dynasty in Chinese history, and it was known as pretty much the golden age of China because this is the age in which guys like Confucius and Taoism were both developed during this time frame. So it was very much an age in which thinking was very important, and it was very much an age that we're really going to get into when we start to talk about Confucius in the next couple of units. So definitely something to know, that the fact that the Zhou Dynasty is the longest dynasty in ancient Chinese history. And like I said, we'll talk about Confucianism and Taoism and all of the rest of that too. The next is, while it looks like it says Qin, it is actually the Qin Dynasty. And the Qin Dynasty was led by this guy, who you should all know by now from our little trip to the Children's Museum, in which we saw the Terracotta Warriors. The Terracotta Warriors were made for this guy right here, and his name was Emperor Qin Shi Huangdi. And Qin established the first dynasty in which he basically united all of the states in China, and he was one of the first to take the title of Emperor of China. He kind of united them underneath his one rule. He is responsible for starting the Great Wall of China. He is also the one responsible for creating the Terracotta Warriors, and a number of other different things. And also, this dynasty gives China its name. So the Qin, in their last name, gives China its name. Like I said, he was responsible for building the Great Wall of China, or starting the Great Wall of China. Not this wall right here that we see here. This was more done down the road. But he kind of built up some dirt walls and some basic walls to try to keep the invaders out of the north. Like I said, he was a very cruel ruler at some times. He burned books they considered to be a threat to his rule. He also had scholars buried alive because he saw them as a threat. He was definitely against the age of thinking in terms of his beliefs. But like I said, he was responsible for creating the Terracotta Warriors army that we saw examples of at the Children's Museum this past last month. So make sure that you guys know that Shi Huangdi was the one that was responsible for creating those. And pretty much his dynasty was a one ruler dynasty rule. After he died, and after he had created this massive Terracotta Warrior army, after he had built this lavish tomb that we still don't know what's going on the inside, his dynasty pretty much ended with his son, who followed him up, who tried to run the dynasty the same way he did, but he didn't have quite as much influence as Shi Huangdi did, and pretty much that ended the dynasty as we know it, and allowed for the next dynasty to come to power, and that is the Han Dynasty. And once again, it's another one of those ages of philosophy and good feeling, lots of thinking going on during this age, and they kind of had very much a time of prosperity and both economics and in scientific discovery. And it kind of all started off with this guy right here, who was His name was Liu Bang, and he was the first emperor to kind of take control. He wasn't born in the line of an emperor or in power. He was a peasant. He came from a peasant class. He worked his way up, and he helped to fight against or the Qin Dynasty, and helped to create the Han Dynasty. And he rises up through power and becomes emperor of China. He takes the name of Han Gaozu. And during his rule, they had a lot of developments that they made, like in the areas of civil service exams, in which they kind of expected people that had the best possible traits to work for the government. And unlike in past, where they would give those certain jobs to people that maybe related, or it was some sort of favor paid back to them for one reason or another. And it was, like I said, it was very much a way to kind of test people to see if they belonged in certain aspects of government. The test usually lasted a really long time, a couple days. It was very stressful. Lots of training going on in there in order to become a part of the civil service. Okay. They also developed things like the seismograph, also acupuncture, and a number of other things that you guys probably have looked up by doing your chart on the on your dynasty chart that you guys are working on off of Google Class. So those are mostly the BC dynasties, and I kind of ran through them pretty quickly because you guys have gotten some good information about them already, hopefully from reading the book, going through the slideshows, and just picking up a number of different things there too. But I just wanted to kind of give you guys a little bit more of a vocal view of it too. Another set of dynasties that we're going to talk about, we were going to talk about Han, but we've already gotten them pretty well covered. But the next two are going to be the Yuan and the Ming. And the Yuan is a definite different type of dynasty than what has occurred in all of the other dynasties of ancient China. And the reason why I say that is because the Yuan are actually not even Chinese. They are from Mongolia. They're Mongolians. And they are a direct descendant of a guy by the name, I'm sure you guys have all heard of, Genghis Khan. He was a leader that kind of united the tribes of Mongolia. He organized the Mongols into a very powerful army. And underneath his control, they ruled a large part of Asia for a very long period of time. And he wanted to control more. So he started to march his way into northern areas of China. And he controlled much of the area just up to the border of northern China by the time he died in 1227. After his death, his sons and his grandsons continued to build onto those conquests. And you guys can see right here, all this yellow area is after his sons and grandsons have taken over much of the area of Asia as a direct result of their conquest. And this is the entire area that they controlled in terms of it pretty much is almost all of Asia, minus the areas in which we call it was Siberia, which is probably too cold for them to go into in order to take over, and then the areas like in India because the Himalayan mountains were blocking their path there, and that's obviously a very large physical feature in order for them to get over. A lot of this was taken over by his grandson named the Kublai Khan. Kublai Khan was, like I said, Genghis Khan's grandson, and he took over the Mongol Empire in 1260. 1279, he completed the takeover of China and established his dynasty of being the Yuan Dynasty, and it would be the first time a foreign ruler would control China. They resented the fact that they were a group of non-Chinese controlling them, thought they were superior to these barbarians that were controlling them, and the Mongols did make a lot of improvements to their transportation system. They built the Grand Canal, they protected trade routes, and this was very important, especially during the age of the Silk Road. There are stories from a guy by the name of Marco Polo, which I'm sure you guys have all heard of, and he was a very famous trader along the Silk Road, and he talked about his interactions with the Kublai Khan during this time frame when he was in power. So the Mongols understood the value of trade, and they protected the route of the Silk Road because they knew it was going to make them lots and lots of money as a result because of some of the things that people were coming to China for because of the wealth that was in China at this time. People wanted the silk from China. People wanted porcelain from China. People wanted gunpowder from China, and a number of other different things as well too. So that it was very important that they opened up these trade routes and made it available to the people outside of China to be able to trade with. The dynasty basically ended after a period of time because the Mongols made several attempts to invade Japan, but there were some major storms that pretty much stopped the Mongols, weakened them to the point in which they could not attack anymore, could not protect themselves, and the Chinese basically were able to rise up against them, and as a direct result of that, push them out of China and lead to the establishment of another Chinese dynasty, which would be the Ming Dynasty. And the Ming Dynasty is pretty much the last one we're going to discuss within ancient China, but they established sea trade with many outside nations. They built things like the Forbidden City, which is the palace in the center of China, and also helped to restore the Great Wall. The picture you saw of the Great Wall with Shi Huangdi just a few moments ago, that was built during the Ming Dynasty. The very high columned walls with lots of stone, very ornate looking walls were built during the age of the Ming Dynasty. Now the Ming Dynasty is also going to be responsible because of the fact that they knew what had happened with the Mongols coming in and invading and taking over their country. They wanted to stop that. So they introduced this phase of what they called isolationism. And this basically was they wanted to avoid all contact with other countries. And as a direct result of that, they pretty much cut themselves off from the rest of the world. And I bring this up in a number of different lessons, especially when we get into the next semester, is that when they cut themselves off from the rest of the world, they probably were one of the most advanced societies in the world because of what they were doing with silk, gunpowder, the block type, everything else like that. They were way ahead of everybody else. The problem is that when they cut themselves off from the rest of the world catches up to them and then passes them. The Chinese often used gunpowder to make fireworks. The rest of the world started to use gunpowder to make guns. And that's going to come up in later lessons we're going to talk about when we start to talk about the age of imperialism next semester. And it's really going to come back to haunt them as to why they cut themselves off from the rest of the world. They thought they were superior. They thought that the rest of the world were barbarians. And they didn't really necessarily need it. And as a result of that, their technology is not going to progress. And it's going to cause some major, major issues for them in the future. So I hope this helped to explain a few more things to you guys. If you guys have any questions, make sure you guys come find me and ask, and I will be around to help you guys out.